conclusion of the amazing mission STS-97, as the 5 astronauts say farewell to their colleagues on board the International Space Station, orbit the Earth, and make their way back home after 11 days, completing an incredible chapter in space exploration. Also, we examine how the technology that pinpoints a patient's best level of contrast sensitivity is also playing a part in the Mars rover missions. The system allows these small but smart vehicles to negotiate boulder fields like this one. Halley's Comet. In 1986, technology enabled us to get a much closer look. American millionaire Denis Tito and 2 Russian cosmonauts arrive at the Baikonur Space Center in Kazakhstan. While the world's first space tourist was exploring the Space Museum, an international furore was raging around him. Mission STS-97 saw 5 astronauts blast off from the Kennedy Space Center on the 101st mission in space shuttle history. Brent Jett, Mike Bloomfield, Joe Tanner, Mark Dono and Carlos Noriega aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour rocketed away from Launch Pad 39B, lighting up the central Florida skies. They burst through the Earth's gravity in pursuit of their target, the International Space Station, orbiting high above the Earth. Their task, to deliver the first set of US solar arrays that would significantly increase the power generation capabilities of the International Space Station. After more than 24 hours in space, Endeavour had the space station in her sights, and the intricate procedure for the docking of the 2 spacecraft had begun. With Expedition 1 crew members Bill Shepard, Yuri Gitsenko and Sergei Krikalev looking on, Commander Brent Jett guided the shuttle to a smooth link-up with the ISS as the 2 craft sailed 230 statute miles above northeast Kazakhstan. With a precision born from long training, Endeavour's astronauts executed a flawless docking to the inhabited International Space Station and took the first step in providing additional power to the orbiting complex, preparation for the first of 3 planned spacewalks. Once settled into their new environment, the astronauts deployed the first of 8 sets of solar arrays that, at the completion of space station construction in 2006, will comprise the station's electrical power system, converting sunlight to electricity. Mission specialists Joe Tanner and Carlos Noriega left the spacecraft on the first of their spacewalks, whilst on board Endeavour, Mark Gono, using the shuttle's robot arm, guided the P6 solar array structure into position as Tanner and Noriega drove it home to its installation point. On the 10th day of the expedition, it was time for the crews to part company. The Endeavour Quintet scheduled to begin their descent back to Earth. The visitors also took time out to sign the ship's log on board the Unity module before closing the hatches between the 2 space vehicles over the northern portion of the Persian Gulf. As well, the astronauts completed final transfers of supplies being delivered to the station and the removal of used equipment, along with other items that were to be transported from the station back to Earth. It was now time for Endeavour's astronauts to say goodbye to Bill Shepard, station commander of Expedition 1, and his fellow astronauts, pilot Yuri Gitsenko and flight engineer Sergei Krikalev. This trio will remain with their craft, having another 3 months of space station living ahead of them. After formally seeking permission to depart Alpha from Commander Shepard, the 5 astronauts bound for Earth took their leave from the spacecraft, while Shepard performed the ceremonial act of ringing the bell, a naval tradition that acknowledged that the commanders of both crews were serving U.S. Navy officers. At 9:51 a.m. Central Standard Time in the U.S., the hatches between the 2 vehicles were closed in preparation for the undocking, scheduled to take place in 3.5 hours' time. Commander Brent Jett secured the hatch, which had provided an open pathway between the space vehicles for the previous 25 hours and 15 minutes. Commander Brent Jett, pilot Mike Bloomfield, and mission specialists Mark Garneau, Joe Tanner, and Carlos Noriega now set their minds to the planning of their next scheduled tasks: the separation of the 2 spacecraft, completion of a circuit of the International Space Station, and then the firing of the shuttle thrusters to leave the vicinity of the station and begin heading for home. Undocking took place as scheduled at 1:13 p.m., 235 statute miles above the border of Kazakhstan and China. When Endeavour made its final separation burn, the orbiter and the space station were near the northeastern coast of South America. Shortly after undocking, Expedition 1 Commander Bill Shepard radioed, "Well done, Endeavour." The shuttle and space station had been docked to one another for 6 days, 23 hours and 13 minutes. Endeavour moved downward from the space station, then began a tail-first full fly-around of the station at a distance of about 500 feet. The maneuver, with pilot Mike Bloomfield at the controls, took about an hour. While Endeavour flew that circle, two spacecraft moving at 5 miles a second flew about 2/3 of the way around the Earth. Although mission STS-97 was now in its final phase, there was still plenty of work for the astronauts. Despite the confined spaces of their vehicle, their spirits remained high, maybe buoyed by the knowledge that they had been instrumental in setting up the most powerful spacecraft ever. Endeavour was leaving behind on the International Space Station the P6 solar array structure, with wings stretching 240 feet from tip to top. It could now provide as much as 60 kilowatts of power under ideal conditions, increasing power to the complex 5-fold, a vital factor in setting the stage for future station assembly. The crew took a last opportunity to record some close-up pictures of the ISS as the two craft began to become separated by the vastness of space. The 5 astronauts also turned their attention to the spectacular view of the Earth's surface, their next destination. But before they could set foot on their homeland, they knew they must face the hazards of re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. In preparation, Commander Brent Jett in the foreground, pilot Mike Bloomfield check out the systems that will be used for landing. They carry out a test of the aerodynamic control surfaces they will use to steer Endeavour like a glider through the atmosphere, and a hot firing of the reaction control system jets they will use to guide the shuttle out of orbit. Meanwhile, spacewalkers Joe Tanner and Carlos Noriega, cruising over the Mediterranean coast, conduct a long-distance press conference with reporters back at Mission Control. Then the entire crew stow away the gear that was used on the space station assembly mission. Touchdown at Kennedy Space Center is now less than 24 hours away. The Endeavour astronauts are woken for their final day to the sound of music from Mission Control. The song, "I'll Be Home for Christmas." Again, they test Endeavour's controls and stow equipment in preparation for their landing in Florida, scheduled for 5:04 p.m. Central Standard Time. They will move into their formal deorbit preparation timeline about noon. There are 2 landing opportunities in Florida today. The first beginning with an orbital maneuvering system engine firing at 3:57 p.m. Central Standard Time, and culminating in a landing on Shuttle Landing Facility Runway 15 at 15:04. In the event weather precludes a landing on that first opportunity, a second landing opportunity exists 1 orbit later with a deorbit burn at 5:35 p.m. Central Standard Time, resulting in a 6:40 p.m. landing at the Kennedy Space Center. For the first landing opportunity of the day, Entry Flight Director Leroy Kane would give the crew a go-no-go call on closing Endeavour's payload bay doors about 1 p.m. The word from Mission Control is go, and the doors are closed. The crew begin to prepare for re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. They're advised by Mission Control that preliminary weather forecasts, while basically favorable for landing, call for a slight chance of showers in the vicinity of the shuttle landing facility. Landing opportunities also are available at Edwards Air Force Base in California, and flight controllers could decide to send Endeavour there if conditions warrant. Edwards has 3 landing opportunities at 6:35 p.m., 8:09 and 9:46 Central Standard Time. Aboard the International Space Station, now about 1,500 miles behind Endeavour, Expedition 1 Commander Bill Shepard advises that his crew are taking advantage of the extra space now available in the Unity module. With additional power provided by the station's new solar arrays, delivered and installed by Endeavour's crew, the station crew now has continuous access to the Unity module. Endeavour's 5 astronauts are given the all-clear to commence re-entry for the first scheduled landing time. Brent Jett begins to guide Endeavour on her descent. As usual, ground control loses contact with the spacecraft momentarily during re-entry, but quickly re-establish contact as the momentous spaceflight enters its final minutes. Amazingly, 4 minutes before landing, the International Space Station flies almost directly over Kennedy Space Center, with the Expedition 1 crew of Bill Shepard, Yuri Gudzenko and Sergei Krikalev asleep, having completed their 41st day in space and their 39th day aboard the International Outpost. Endeavour heralds her arrival back on Earth with an early evening twin sonic boom as the shuttle goes subsonic just minutes before reaching its landing strip. At 5:03 p.m., 36 minutes after sunset, she touches down on runway 15, wrapping up a journey of 4,476,164 miles, or more than 7 million kilometers. It was the 16th night landing in shuttle program history, 12 days after blastoff, providing a spectacular illumination of the skies above Florida and having been one of the most watched space expeditions of all time. Endeavour and her crew returned home safely. It was the completion of a mission that saw 3 spacewalks conducted to install, check out and activate the first of 4 planned sets of solar arrays that will operate on the International Space Station facility. With Endeavour's landing, the stage was set for the next shuttle flight of Atlantis to deliver the U.S. laboratory Destiny to the ISS, the cornerstone of scientific research on the growing complex. For the crew, it was time to relax and relish the excitement of being reunited with their families. Mission STS-97 and its crew, Brent Jett, Mike Bloomfield, Joe Tanner, Mark Gono and Carlos Noriega, had concluded another outstanding chapter in the history of space exploration. Every week, a group of retirees get together at the Brookside Golf Course in Los Angeles, California. Bill Graham has been a golfer for years and is used to playing with handicaps, but he now plays with a different kind, a severe loss of central vision caused by age-related macular degeneration. The disease has claimed the center portion of his eyesight, where fine details are recognized. The condition affects 1 out of 5 Americans over the age of 75. At the first tee, a friend helps line up the shot. Bill has to rely upon his peripheral vision. He sees something like this. Everyday activities like crossing busy intersections are difficult with macular degeneration, and reading a newspaper is nearly impossible. To date, there's no cure for the disease, just measures to keep it in check. But Dr. Terry Lawton of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, is working on an image filtering technique that helps people read. This is an example of an unfiltered versus a filtered word. Using a closed-circuit TV, Dr. Lawton measures the number of correct responses given by Mr. Graham during a test that mixes filtered and unfiltered sentences.
The dogs swam in the water, and played all day.
The digitally processed words actually appear less readable for someone with normal sight.
I want you to tell me in each one of these circles.
Standard eye testing until recently never measured an individual's sensitivity to contrast, which is how well various patterns are seen from light to dark.
How about in this circle?
Okay.
Dr. Lawton has developed a system that very accurately measures this ability. By hitting buttons, Mr. Graham tells a computer whether he sees the pattern on the screen slant to the right or to the left. The technology pinpoints his best level of contrast sensitivity, which then gets translated into the way words are shaded and filtered. Eventually, closed-circuit viewers will be on the market, which magnify and filter words according to an individual's contrast need.
To hear the birds.
As a result of Dr. Lawton's research, her image processing technique has been used on Mars rover missions in assisting the vehicle to negotiate boulder fields such as this one, photographed by the Viking Martian probe. The filter acts to highlight individual boulders in the same way it uses contrast to emphasize the shape of letters in a word, thus pinpointing obstacles for the rover to avoid. NASA's human factors research and its ties to image processing helping man and machine extend the ability to see. If we were to travel away from the sun, leaving the planets behind till they fade into the blackness of space, and until the sun itself is just another bright spot in the sky, we would see a thin cloud of objects enveloping the entire solar system. These are the primordial comets, billions of icy globes, no more than 30 miles across. They've been here unchanged since the beginning of the solar system. Halley's Comet began its first journey around the Sun thousands of years ago. When it came close to Earth in 1986, NASA and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory were studying a mission to intercept it with a spacecraft. It was an opportunity too good to be missed to investigate the best-known comet of all at close range. The proposed craft would use hardware and technology from the successful Voyager mission to Jupiter and Saturn, and from the then developing Galileo mission to orbit Jupiter. It was to be equipped to examine the comet in detail and would carry a new electronic camera to produce highly detailed pictures. Other instruments, many from Voyager, were added to reveal the comet's chemistry, record its ultraviolet and infrared radiation, measure its magnetic field, and collect samples of its dust. This unique mission was to begin in the summer of '85. NASA's new space shuttle would be used to launch the probe on its 8-month journey to Halley. Similar missions were also planned by European, Japanese, and Soviet space teams. Guiding the spacecraft to a successful encounter required the pinpoint techniques learned over 20 years of space exploration. Intercept would occur after Halley passed the Sun. A full 2 months before the encounter, cameras aboard the spacecraft would begin taking pictures, returning thousands of photos to Earth. Probing within 500 miles of the nucleus, the robot was to give us our first look at the heart of Halley's Great Comet, and a glimpse back to the start of the solar system. However, as history dictates, interception was aborted. Russia's Baikonur Space Center was a hive of activity as launch time neared on the controversial mission which would carry the world's first space tourist into orbit. Wealthy American space buff Denis Tito arrived with his fellow Russian crew members Taglat Mosabayev and Yuri Bachurin. 60-year-old Tito paid Russia $20 million for the round trip to the International Space Station. NASA had expressed safety concerns about Tito's flight, saying the Californian was not adequately trained and might prove a distraction for the other cosmonauts or the astronauts aboard the space station. Tito had originally planned to travel to Russia's Mir space station, but the government was forced to dump the aging orbiter due to a lack of funds. Not wanting to lose the $20 million that the American billionaire was believed to be paying, Russian space officials offered him a spot on a 10-day cargo run to the International Space Station. As final preparations got underway ahead of the launch, an international incident was brewing, which could have put an end to the entire trip altogether. It began when America announced that all 3 command computers aboard the space station were not working or not communicating. Russia was told it would have to delay the rocket launch until the problem was corrected, but flatly refused to do so. The cosmonauts kept well out of the furore, preferring to tour the Star City Space Museum while officials on both sides came to an agreement. NASA decided to delay the return of Space Shuttle Endeavour for 2 days as a safety precaution, so that the Russian launch could go ahead as planned. The shuttle was able to provide vital communications for the station when its computers went down, and may be required to do so again. The deal reached with the Russians meant that neither Tito nor his family could sue NASA if anything went wrong, and it would even require him to pay for any station equipment he broke while he was aboard, an unlikely situation considering he was to play no operational role on the 10-day spaceflight.